unmute. You're live now. Thank you, councillors, and welcome to today's council meeting with regard to deliberations of the annual plan. Please can you stand and Councillor Dalgety.
Almighty God, as members of the Rangitikei District Council, we give thanks for all the good things of our district and the advantages we enjoy. We pray that you will give us wisdom and guidance as we conduct the affairs of this meeting. We pray for all the communities in the district we represent. Help us to be fair and honest in our discussions, and help us to work together in unity for the welfare of all your people. Amen.
Thank you. We've received apologies from councillors Piki Tiora Hero, councillor Lambert and councillor Rakawa. Was that a request passed on for you to apologise?
Yes, they both said to me that they would not be at the meeting.
Thank you. Would somebody like to so move? Councillor Carter moving, seconded. Councillor Duncan, those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. We have no public forum. Moving to item number 4, conflict of interest declarations. Councillors, you can declare now, or you can declare relevant to either a submission, or you can declare in terms of a recommendation.
Just noting the any conversations relating to salary for staff. Me personally.
Because you've got someone in your family associated with that.
Yes.
As an explanation. Thank you. Confirmation of order of business. Just moving replacing item number 5 or preceding it to an item 7.3 with regard to council debt. There has been a position put out and you have it on your laptops, on your tablets and printed copies in front of you. Through the Chief Executive, you happy if Mr. Toombs provides brief comment around this?
Yes, you wish.
Please, Mr. Toombs.
Thank you very much. I'll just make 3 points before invite any questions. So this paper is basically an extension from last week's Finance and Performance Committee. There was a discussion there around debt and debt ceilings and how debt ceilings are determined by reference to the 4 borrowing covenants and the fact that one of them is certain to a certain amount of internal influence. The other 3 are pretty much fixed as a debt interest being a fixed ratio of total revenue or rates revenue. I'm hoping and I'm thinking that the paper as presented does show that there will be a greater emphasis on debt going through reporting in the future, and I'll be proposing that similar reports to this are presented to all Finance and Performance Committee meetings, maybe at 3 monthly or 6 monthly intervals moving forward, and possibly Risk and Assurance Committee meetings. I'll be guided by what members' thoughts are there. But really this was just to kind of show the greater emphasis we're placing on future debt levels as opposed to kind of current debt positioning.
Yes, councillors, the way I view this is that this is background information which may or may not tend to a position that you consider as part of deliberations. So it adds to the wealth of information that you have around that, but it is not a submission as such. Any questions around that? So it's certainly something that you may wish to bear in mind. Anything further from you?
Just to highlight one of the final comments of the paper, that the last LTP showed a fairly comfortable degree of debt headroom. There is a potential for that degree of comfort to be reduced. So hence it further scrutiny.
Any questions around the report? No? Okay. Thank you very much. It's certainly something that we will need to consider when we're making decisions today. Right?
Can we move into the item?
Yeah. Would somebody like to so move that we receive it as a late item for this council meeting? Thank you, councillor Cowker and councillor Dalgety. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. By the way, I will make comment, we have received a report from the Office of the Ombudsman, and part of the things that have come out of that report, and will come to council subsequently, are some recommendations. We have come out of that report reasonably well. But one of the recommendations that they would like council to consider at some stage in the future is that when people vote, that individual names are recorded against each individual voting position. So we will construct a reply. Bear that in mind as you go through today, the technical difficulties with us without electronic voting. But certainly what I would suggest is if you are strongly opposed and want your vote recorded against, please, it is up to you to ask for that. It is not up to the chair to ask whether you want that. Do you see the distinction? Thank you very much. Move then to item number 6, confirmation minutes. You have them in front of you, and I'm sure you've read them. Looking for alterations and corrections, pages 6, 7, 8, 9. Just in terms of 9, what I had put in a comment was that initially the individual submissions, the questions asked by councillors against the submitter were not recorded. And subsequently, so we don't have that question and answer flow back. However, then when I read the Ngātawa report, I noticed that there were some in there. So how we record that may be up to a council discussion later. But if you want a particular position that you have outlined as part of these minutes, it's your opportunity to say so. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and I note halfway down page 15, Councillor Carter, Miss Carter responded to questions indicating the school was unable to contribute to the cost, etc. So that's where it was covered. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. The only one on page 23 from me, Bain Simpson submission 086. Mr. Simpson suggested a one-way street along Broadway and Martin. He will provide a sketch of this to staff. Did that happen? And if it did happen, should it be part of the table documents?
It's online as part of the table documents.
Thank you. (24, 25), 26, 27, and 28. Would somebody like to so move or move amendments? Councillor Wilson moving.
Happy to move as received and circulated.
Second, Councillor Carter. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. We now move into the analysis of submissions to framing the annual plan. Georgia, can I pass to you? I believe you're the author, and do you wish to make any comments?
Thank you. So this report with all of the attachments is to give the information that enables deliberation on the submissions received on the draft annual plan 23-24. There are 272 submissions, including the late submissions. And you also heard submitters speak at the hearings on the 11th and 12th of May. So all the submissions are attached under separate cover, and there are also officer summaries of submissions and responses to the issues. attached where there's been identified a request or anything else that requires a decision. Those have been listed in the attachments, but they've also been extracted to the recommendations section. And we also have prepared, if there are financial implications to the decisions, Mr. Toombs has a spreadsheet that can go on the screen to show what the implications will be of the decisions. And once the decisions have been made in this meeting, it'll be incorporated into the draft annual plan, which will come back to you for adoption. And I'll be listening online for most of this meeting. So if you do have general questions for me, I can ask them now. But as for the issues and decisions raised, they'll be able to be asked to the relevant general manager as well.
Thank you. Any questions relating to either how this has been compiled or process going forward? Councillor Dalgety.
I would just like to, in this forum, thank Georgia for the presentation of what came in front of us. It was hugely appreciated and would have been a lot of hard work. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Right, I now just before we start on deliberations, and I'm going to make some general comments. First of all, you have an incredible amount of information and a number of resources, including the stuff that you have online, including the framing submissions, and it is all in different places. So when you were referring to it today, and especially if you're referring to submissions, it would be incredibly useful if you say, this is the page number that I'm referring to and the source. In terms of your scope to make decisions and recommendations, first of all, your scope is limited to submissions within the plan. So if you decide that you would like to move a recommendation for some obscure new project or cost or whatever, that is fine, so long as you can demonstrate that it is linked to a submission in front of you. You don't have the opportunity at this stage to just dream up and effectively something new. Okay. As part of that process, council hasn't submitted to its own plan. So there are no submissions from council here, but you should be aware that there are some financial projections that you should be aware of that will unnecessarily flow into council's position going into the annual plan. Next recommendation from me is that if you're looking to put a motion or recommendation on the floor, it would be incredibly useful to staff if you actually have that written out, that it's not you just talking. It would make the day flow a lot more easily. And just checking, I don't. That's pretty much it from me at the moment. Anything else that staff would like to raise?
Just looking at my senior staff. I think you
Right. Moving into deliberations, recommendation 1 that the report analysis of submissions to framing 23-24 annual plan be received. Councillor Carter, Councillor Duncan, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Recommendation 2 that council receive the submissions and their numbers, etc., including the late, and the key thing is including the late submissions and their name 216, 250, 254, 260, 270 through to 254 to 260 to 270 and 272. That is a formal part of process. Would somebody like to move that? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Carter, those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Recommendation 3, there is a recommendation there, but what I would suggest is that recommendation is held back until later in the meeting. And the reason for that is I suspect as we deal with submissions, there may be comment from staff that you wish to have amend or refer to. So with your permission, I'll hold that recommendation back until later in the meeting process. Is there any problem with that from any councillor? No? Thank you. Recommendation 4, this is for key choice 1, and there are some recommendations there. Now I'll point out that these are recommendations from staff and they are designed to assist you with a position. You do not necessarily have to adopt or follow a recommendation whether as it's currently written. It's up to you to put your own perspective on it if you wish. Any questions around that as part of the process? Because with recommendation 4, I would like to put some alternatives in place. And I have, following my direction, written them out. And are we able to put them up on the screen, please? There's a series of recommendations from me. Are you able to bring that up? Some of them align very closely with what council staff are recommending. So,
The first one there. I wouldn't repeat that. Just scroll up and show Andy's first one.
okay, now what I'll do is I'll read all of the recommendations and then I will give you my reasoning, the background reasoning behind this, and tie it back to submission as I have to do so, and then deal with each recommendation as they fall. So the first recommendation is just really approving a budget, and it's very close to the recommendation that's in council. But it may well need a tie back to saying it aligns in principle with key choice 1. Recommendation 2 about focusing on tie happy ahead of Martin is pretty much per the officer's recommendation 3. Recommendation 3 is that prior to preparing the tender documents that we engage with key people. Recommendation 4 is that the design process calls for tenders to provide the following elements. And the key part of that is tenders will be considered for all of the individual elements of design. And I'll provide the rationale as to my thinking. First of all, when I have looked at the submissions, and there's a number of submissions relating to people, and I can provide those. What they are essentially saying is you need to save some money, but more importantly, I think they are saying what we want is the existing building strengthened and be brought up for fit for purpose, etc. But they are specifically saying that they also want the auditorium size retained as is. And they are also quite specific, and for instance, I refer to Steve Cross's submissions around saying there has been poor engagement in terms of the design. So the intent is to go back and satisfy those things. Any general questions before we go into each one of those submissions? Each one of those recommendations from me. And again, you can go back to the staff one if you wish. That's your prerogative. Right, I'll go back now and deal with them separately.
Sorry, I have one
Councillor.
question. So my specific question will be around the previous unsolicited offer by Mr. Morgenstern around his ideas. Would that be covered under, it doesn't have a number up there, I'm assuming the one with the points, the earthquake strengthening to make compliance issues to provide for it. It would be covered under there, that would be open for him again.
So that is part of my thinking. First of all, just to clarify, councillor, at no stage did council say we are not interested in working with him.
Understand.
What we have said is that that would be considered as part of a process. But if you scroll down a little bit further, what he has suggested is that he is interested only in the strengthening of the building, and that the other elements is up to council. Okay. So why I'm saying tenders will be considered for all or individual elements of the design. For instance, you could potentially down the track, I find it difficult referring to a particular person or contract because it will be open.
Mm-hmm.
But in essence, if you have somebody that says, look, I can provide you with a fantastic solution to your heating concerns, for example, but I don't have the skills to handle the other thing. Ideally, you would like to align them with a principal contractor and say, you need to get, person A needs to talk to person B and subcontract or some shape or form.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, if that couldn't happen or couldn't happen easily, you could consider that as a separation. I'm just trying to leave the door open for each individual contract. But perhaps if we come back to that and deal with them in sequence. Councillor Wong.
Your Worship, the recommendation says for the restored and earthquake strengthened Taipei Town Hall. Does that give scope to maintaining the facade and rebuilding new behind there?
I think it would still give that scope.
It does.
Yeah, it would still give that scope.
Thank you.
So perhaps if we go back to the first part of this, because there are some parts of it that align fairly closely. So the first one from me is that council approves the new budget for the Taipei Town Hall Civic Centre for up to 14 million, noting that council has received 1.883 for better off funding towards the project. It may well be, and I'll take a comment from staff and the chief executive, if that needs to be specifically aligned to solving key choice with regard to key choice 1, I'd be happy to do so. The suggested changes from me were really that the previous recommendation had specified a design, and the design documents, if I went to these, they absolutely specify a design, and there may be consideration of and that involves a reduction in the auditorium, for example. So I want to leave that door open. But I'm happy to take a suggestion from staff or from make a comment.
Thank you, Worship. I can accept that there were some members of the public that misinterpreted the broad outline that was in the option. That was only ever given as or intended, I should say, as an indicative outline, certainly not as a finalised design. So if I could just make that comment. Secondly, I think the recommendation might be better as you've just suggested. And if I could make a suggestion to you, Your Worship, that it says the council approves the new budget for Taipei Town Hall / Civic Centre broadly outlined as option 1, comma, of up to And therefore it's clear that, that your recommendation is not referring to option 2.
Yeah. I'd be happy at this stage, it's my recommendation, my motion, but I'd be happy for that to be included. So if that can be,
Probably as option 1 of the consultation document, or our annual plan consultation, key choices. Carol, would you give it a thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
Just one thing, I wonder if the 1.8 million shouldn't be as included. Just to note that it's not as well as, it's already in the 14 million, as I understand it.
Yes, I'm happy with that. As included, it was fine. Well, we're dealing with that. Councillor Calkin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could you just clarify the intent of your recommendation for me and sort of just expanding on what Councillor Wong said? This isn't necessarily talking about building new behind it, behind the facade, but it could be.
Could be. Absolutely. All it's doing, in effect, is outlining that there is a budget available and how that design plays out, and whether it is a new building in behind or how that is achieved is still in that mix. Councillor Wilson.
Just a procedural matter, Your Worship, before you move to your subsequent recommendations that you've listed up there, does the original recommendation need to be dealt with first?
No.
Or can it be
Until the recommendation actually has a mover and a second, it doesn't exist. Councillor Wong.
May I just, through you, clarify the position about the building new for perhaps councillors, is that the new build may be, from what I gather, a cheaper option than to restore the old building is why we want to maintain that option, not because Taipi is trying to get a Swifty and get a new building. It's more about economic responsibility for the whole district.
Well, it's leaving the door wide open in my mind in terms of that budget. And when it comes to deliberation around tenders, and if somebody says, well, there's a series of tenders that can achieve the principles that you're looking for at a cheaper cost, that becomes part of your consideration and acceptance of tenders. I will move that recommendation 1.
Excuse me, Your Worship, they haven't actually put that that's included.
Thank you.
It's not in the wording.
If we can get the councillor to express what she'd like.
Yes, you did. Would you like to repeat it, please, councillor?
Halfway through, of up to 14 million, noting that council has received 1.8 million, that number, for better off funding, that's included.
This is included.
Or that is, or towards the project that is included in this budget.
Are you happy with that?
Yes.
I am.
I'm sorry, we should, technically we've not received the money.
No, it's true. We expect to receive it.
Will receive?
Yes, we expect to.
May receive, if you like.
Oh, well.
So it could be 2 million down the gurgler already.
Well,
We've done that before. Waited for money
And you just changed has received to may receive.
Is likely to receive. Is likely to receive.
I will move that, looking for a seconder to it. Councillor Wong, you're seconding it. So I'll speak to the motion. I think we've already pretty much outlined it. All the stars is put a live budget figure into the annual plan. That's it in essence. And it tags it to the preferred choice of the submitters and preferred choice of council. Like any other speakers? Mr. Toombs,
Just to clarify, if I may, that the figure we're talking about here, the 14 million, it's a project budget that will straddle more than one financial year. So next financial year, this recommendation probably won't impact what we spend next financial year. What it will do is to make all future debt considerations aware of the programme budget. Yeah.
any other speakers? Certainly, Mr. Moore, Councillor Moore.
I'm going to speak against the motion for two reasons. I think the $14 million should be reduced in this day and age. I know the cost, but down to say $10 million to give a little bit more sharpening of the pencil of the project management and the expectation from the people that may be doing the building. And the second reason being, I'm not comfortable having $1.8 million likely to receive in a budget without the, solid facts that we're going to get that money, because all of a sudden we could be expecting $2 million and we may not get it because it's likely to receive. So, yeah, on those two reasons, I am speaking against the motion. Although I do think there should be a recommendation that we go ahead with the project.
Any other speakers before right of reply? Councillor Wilson.
I'll be speaking for the motion, and I would note for Councillor Bourne that the recommendation says of up to $14 million. It does not say $14 million. And regardless of whether or not we're likely to receive or do receive the money, the $14 million is still a budgeted figure and would not have an impact on our annual plan going forward. As Mr. Toombs just said, it will straddle a number of years. So I'm quite comfortable with the way it's worded up there, and I think it achieves what the submissions have requested of us. And we could note that any work would have to come back to council for further approval, which we could then look at scope and design changes to help reduce those costs. So hear where you're coming from, but I don't think that this recommendation as it's written stops us for having those scope and design changes to help possibly reduce fees going further.
Councillor Duncan.
I'd like to speak in favour of the motion, but could I also ask, I believe Mr. Beggs has given us his view of the likelihood of receiving that money. I wonder if I could ask for comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Why I didn't want to say it has been received is that it implies that we have that money in our bank account. We do not have that money in the bank account. However, we have entered into a contract that has been resolved by council that central government will pay us that money on application. And it's just the sensitivity of the wording. If I had some time, I probably would rewrite that again, but noting that I am now on record, we have a contract with the Crown that they will pay us this money if we do the work. And we have until 1 July 2027 to complete.
Thank you.
Councillor Dalgetty.
I'll speak in favour of the recommendation.
You've now had three speakers for, with council's permission. Well, I think that I spoke for it. So we've had three speakers for. Are there any speakers against?
Speak again.
Just a point of clarification, Your Worship. In the Better Business case, can I ask staff what the contingency amount was within that $14 million budget?
10%. There was also a price escalation cost, and what I did ask, good point, I did ask for that information, and quite happy to pass these around.
We have it online to Your Worship.
But in essence, the contingency was put at 10% of a new build, 15% for reuse options, and that was relating to Martin Civic Centre, and I believe that the same considerations were put into Tai Happy.
I would need to clarify that, Your Worship, with the team.
But that was the general principles that applied to Martin.
Just a question on.
Thank you.
A question on process. I just noticed this recommendation doesn't say that council adopts option 1 for the Tai Happy Town Hall Civic Centre. It's basically just setting the budget for it. We haven't actually agreed as a council to go through with that option and that recommendation. It's approving the budget.
Yeah. However, it does tie it back, and if you want a specific recommendation separate to that, I'm not sure that it's needed, because it has said it's aligned to, the budget is aligned to the option.
Yeah, personally, I think there's one where you agree with the option, and then there's one you can disagree with the process, the stuff behind the budgets and stuff.
Any other speakers against? I'll write a reply. I think is Dina online?
Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't aware of that earlier. She wasn't there before. Adina, do you wish to make a comment around contingency?
Yes, please. So for the Tai Happy Civic Centre discussion, we actually included a line that was 30% of contingency to construction costs for the factor that this construction would be in Tai Happy. And we have seen out of other projects that there's definitely a higher price to pay for the travel that a lot of companies will be doing from other places. So there's contingency 25%, and there's also a 30% location premium because it is so unknown. So there's a lot of contingency in this budget.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Loudon, I didn't mean to mislead you. I was looking at the information I had.
That was my understanding.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go back to write a reply. In essence, this gives council a budget tagged to option 1 that for them to go out and prepare effectively tender documents and look at how it can be done and so on. Whether or not you accept the tender price, even if it is within budget, is up to council consideration at the time. I think Councillor Wilson outlined my right of reply fairly well, and I'll close it there. Having closed that, I now must move to a vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Councillor Morn, did you want to vote? Did you vote against, and do you want that recorded?
Oh, no, I didn't vote against.
Well, thank you very much.
I've taken advice of the...
My second recommendation 2, that council directs staff to focus on the completion of this project ahead of the Martin Civic Centre and starts the design process as from 1st of July 23, which is earlier than planned in the long-term plan 21 to 31, is as virtually the staff recommendation. And I will move that, looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Loudon seconding. This has been something that we've discussed at length, and I'll reserve my right of reply. I'll go Councillor Duncan, and then I'll go to Councillor Calkin. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'd like some advice here. I wonder if we shouldn't include at this point in that particular recommendation that staff start the design process with consultation.
Cover that in recommendation 3.
Okay. Beg your pardon.
Yeah, that's why I took everybody through so that will be covered in recommendation 3.
Very good, thank you.
Councillor Cowcan.
It may be trivial, but I would have concerns moving forward with a recommendation like that, calling out Martin Civic Centre, given that foreshadows a decision we haven't yet made on the Martin Civic Centre. And I would prefer us to just see something that says we'll direct staff to focus on the completion of this project starting the 1st of July 23, which is earlier than planned, and completely remove the topic of Martin.
Okay, you've spoken to the motion. Other speakers to the motion?
Speaking in favour of the motion, and if I can just point out to some other councillors that may not be aware of, may not been here in the last triennium, the decision to move this was noted to apply for the Better Off funding. And the application for the Better Off funding was that we would get that money if we were to focus on the Taihape build to enable us to expedite additional work, so therefore we'd be better off. I think that this needs to be referenced with regards to us applying for the money, that this is an active decision that we are moving a project up the line to enable us to access the Better Off funding as part of our agreement with central government. So I think it's relevant to have it in there. I don't think that it preempts any decisions that are later, although I hear where you're coming from with that, but I think it is important to have that reference, and I think this does that reference.
Any other speakers? All right. Right of reply. I think Councillor Wilson is once again correct. There is a public perception here as well, and we have listened to the public concerns around Taihape not having a functional centre. We are listening as part of the submission processes around where a whole lot of submitters say you can't afford to do everything. You have to cut your cloth. And so this is clearly identifying it as a priority. That's my right of reply. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Recommendation 3, and this deals with, I believe, Councillor Duncan's comment, that prior to preparing the tender documents for the council engages with the key users of the Taihape Town Hall Civic Centre to clarify community needs regarding the design. And in this, I tie it back to the submissions of past councillor, Byford, page 47, the submissions of Steve Cross, page 52, page 183, both of whom are suggesting that the auditorium size should not be changed, and they're quite emphatic about that. And the submission Ken Mason regards comment, retain heritage, refurbish but do not renovate. So I believe that we haven't been as complete in engagement with people like the drama and the users of the auditorium, and I just want to make sure that that link is closed. That's the intent of this. I'm not saying that some consultation hasn't happened, but I'm replying to the submissions that have occurred. Looking for, thank you, Councillor Duncan.
Happy to move.
Oh, looking for a seconder to that. Thank you, Councillor Wong, seconding. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, yes, thank you. Just to say that I totally agree with what your worship said, and it's very clear from what we found in the submissions and what I've heard on the street that is the desire that that the usability of the building is spoken to from the community.
Any other speakers? Councillor Louder.
Secretary, the architect involved in what's been submitted so far, will that architect be involved going forward? Because I gather that this project, they were asked to do something by council. No disrespect to the architect.
All the way through, we're going to have somebody providing us with technical advice. Yeah, so whether it is, how we do that is really up to advice from staff.
I can answer that question if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, Adina online.
Yeah, Dino, please.
Thank you. So the thought process around the procurement of the experts that are needed to do this complex sort of work currently is that we are trying to probably put together a tender that is requesting a sort of teamwork effort. So we would be keen to see tenders for basically a group of experts that have decided to work together. There will be like an architect, engineering, earthquake strengthening advice, and a construction company as well, so that we have a very early contractor engagement, which will help us make the process of construction much easier. So in this way, we are currently looking at opening it up to the market and basically trying to get a team that will work well together to have the most, efficient outcome for this work.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Any other speakers? Do you still need a right to reply?
No, I don't think so.
Put it
Thank
to the
you.
vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 4, that the design process calls for tenders to provide the following elements: earthquake strengthening to meet the compliance issues of the strengthened building, to provide for efficient heating, fire standards, power upgrades, and to consider the user's expectations with regard to design. So if you're going to, and tenders will be considered for all individual elements of the design. And I'll speak to this. First of all, if I start at the bottom, to consider the user's expectations redesign, that is purely put in place to say that if you do have a group that you are consulting with, that you have some process to include their thoughts. It doesn't say necessarily that you have to adopt them, but you should consider them. I'll just wait. Do you have a question around that element?
Yep. Will that cover, like the sound system and the internet and all that sort of stuff that was brought up at the consultation meeting?
Yeah. Thank you. And that's designed to be able to answer the submissions of people like Steve Cross. Yeah. The earthquake strengthening is a given, and it is given to meet compliance issues with regard to the strengthened building, bearing in mind that there may be issues that council comes back to for consideration. For instance, once you strengthen a building, once you spend a significant amount of money on a building, that brings into all other compliance issues, and we will be caught up in that process. Some of those compliance issues, if they're minor in nature, council may have the will to say that they will consider setting those aside. That is available under law. But there'll be a number of issues that would need current fire standards. I can't see for a second that council would say we'll waive that, etc. Councillor Wong.
Compliance for accessibility,
Correct.
is that included in what you just implied?
Yes. So compliance includes all things. For instance, it may be on the number of toilets that are being provided. It may be on the height of handrails, whatever. So we would need to understand that if the building was strengthened. But it does say efficient heating, power upgrades, etc. The reason I have done it in this shape and form, ideally, you would like to have one tender that meets all of the above. However, you have had an option provided that we basically said, hold that, we may consider it in time. And that option said, I can solve your principal issue around strengthening, but I don't want to be involved in things like heating, lighting, those sorts of things. Ideally, you would like to think that that tenderer then aligns with other people to satisfy the other issues. But if all issues are satisfied, but it doesn't meet our heating requirements, then there's the opportunity for somebody independent, for example, to be able to solve that. A question?
No, Your Worship, I was just wondering if I could give you some operational feedback on this recommendation.
Yes.
Thank you. Normally we wouldn't have such, because the recommendation would have come from staff, so thank you for allowing me to talk on this one. I think what Adina has outlined is our recommended procurement strategy, and thank you for reiterating that, which is having a head contract effectively and having that person, I would call it in a technical term, systems integration, so integrating all of the elements that you've set up there, and their role would be to coordinate everyone to get the final outcome. That's best practice, and it's also something that Adina has been working on with other experts in the country, and I think you've outlined it well. I think someone could, that would be our recommended tender approach. Someone could come in with a non-conforming tender and have just that element, and we would bring it to council for consideration as part of that analysis process. Does that fit what you're about? Yeah, it does.
That fits within this wider principle.
Thank you.
So in effect, you can consider non-conforming tenders as part of, and there may well be a process where there is a gap analysis and that needs to be resolved.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to move that, looking for a seconder for discussion. You seconding, Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, thank you.
I've spoken to this enough, I think. I'll call for other speakers. Councillor Wilson.
Speaking in support, and I would just like to point out that the underlying principle of this recommendation is to enable us to better deliver the project at a cost for not only for the people of Taipi, but for the people of Rangitikei District. And it gives us the scope to consider what I believe may well be savings within that project. So therefore, it is our responsibility to have a recommendation like this to give us that scope to deliver.
Any other speakers? Councillor Louder.
I'd like to speak for the motion. I'd like to thank His Worship for teasing option 1 recommendation out. I think it makes it far more clear and concise. Thank you.
Any other speakers? We've had 3 or 4. Any against? Although nobody spoke against it, I'll use the right to reply. Thank you, Councillor Loudon. But I'd just like to comment to Councillor Wong, this does not preclude anything. This merely says these are things that we wish to resolve. Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. And congratulations, Taiha. Moving on to recommendation 5, and by the way, as Mayor, I'm not looking to move all these recommendations, but on this particular one, I think that there needed to be some change in some leadership. Recommendation 5, this is with regard to key choice number 2, that council proceeds with a do minimum option, strengthens existing building, etc. at 46 High Street and Martin Library Building to a minimum of 75 new built NBS as new build standard and improves the facilities through minor renovations and space organisation with a budget of. That is the council staff recommendation. I am anticipating that there may be change to that, but Councillor Wilson, is that an indication you wish?
Yes, Your Worship, I don't know that and I apologise, I don't have anything written down with regards to a recommendation to change, but I simply think the best way to proceed this is I'm going to move a recommendation that we do not proceed with this recommendation at this stage.
So are you suggesting a pause?
Yes, I am, and to that is what I would be speaking to if I was to receive a seconder, that we do not recommend this key choice 5 or recommendation 5.
I'll go Councillor Carter, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Dalgety.
Question.
Yeah, I think they're all
Sorry, I was
questions.
seconding. Oh,
You're seconding,
sorry.
and there isn't a motion on the floor.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
I thought there was a motion that we do not proceed.
Yeah, that one.
Simply speaking to the recommendation as it's written up there.
Head here is still in there, so.
But if you do that, that says in effect you strengthen the existing buildings, etc., and you do work here.
No, I don't think it no, I don't.
That's the way it's written.
Unless that was to be changed in the wording that says at this time, or subject to further investigation, possibly.
I might have to step in and help you out a little bit here, I wonder. Councillor Moore.
Question on that, was there a do minimum option in our submissions? We had key choice 1 was just on the council building or something else, but
So there are a vast range of submissions on this.
Yeah.
There are a huge number of submissions say, yes, do it, and submitting either on option 1 or option 2. There are a number of people that said, don't do it at all, you can't afford it. There are a number of people that said, there are some people that said this site should be used instead. Perhaps I might actually, I did draft something for me, but I wonder if I can help you out, Councillor Wilson.
Happy to, as I said, I have not got anything drafted, and my apologies for that.
I wonder if this covers it in 2 parts, and this was from my thinking. The recommendation 1 would be that council pauses the build process for the marked civic buildings to allow for a fuller understanding of council's debt analysis with the government changes in Three Waters, etc., and looks at a deliberation in the next long-term plan. And if you did that, I believe that you would need to set a budget around being able to do a limited amount of, and I take some guidance from staff, about a limited amount of work on this, understanding this, and to be able to deal with essentially maintenance status quo issues of this building.
Are you comfortable, Your Worship, if we write up your resolution line?
But I'm just wondering, the councillor, you put something forward first. Are you happy?
That's what I was going to speak to if I'd been given the right to speak. So you've actually summed up exactly what my intention was with regards to and somehow pausing or rejecting that
I
recommendation.
don't want to overrule you here, but are you happy if I put that up on a board?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
A question while that's been typed up, possibly?
Sorry.
Question while that's been typed up, possibly?
Yeah, certainly.
I'm just interested in the time frame around pause. I feel that is leaving it very open as to the time frame, and that's got a little yeah, that's a bit of a red flag in my mind.
So the motion ties it to the LTP. So the pause would be in effect for a period of year. I'll explain my thinking here. We've had in very recent times, some advice from our Treasury Department, Lord on High, around our future debt limits and projections, etc. We have uncertain knowledge around how the three waters will impact on us and when, because although it was portrayed to kick in 2026, the latest advice that we've had is it could be prior to that. There'll be different areas that are called out earlier than 2026 for transition. So there's all sorts of uncertainties we have. There are questions that have been raised in the submissions around, maybe this was a better site. And I think that we then need to align that with the better business case, which clearly said this was a very low priority. And so there's a whole lot of flags in my mind that council is not in the position to say, we are in the position of tie happy. We've got a greater degree of knowledge and it's a smaller budget, but I wouldn't feel confident to say that we are going to spend a very, very significant amount of money. So can we wipe out those movers and seconders for a second? Although my words, Councillor Wilson, would you be happy to move that?
Happy to move it as worded.
Councillor Duncan, would you be happy to second that?
I would second it.
Leave it to you to speak.
Oh, thank you for not wiping me out. Just, I actually do agree 100% with what you've said and the way you've explained it. We do have some additional information that's come to hand, particularly around the debt. We do have a very, very moving beast within this whole three waters in our debt position. The other consideration which you didn't mention, which came out of the earlier recommendations around tie happy, is with those recommendations at a time, we have a lot of scope, I believe, to work with individuals to help reduce the costs of that project, but still deliver what the submissions have requested of us. And if that is the case, as I certainly hope it will be, that changes our debt position again in going into the next long-term plan. The other thing that the original recommendation had said was that we do minimum. We don't know what do minimum is, and that's to quote Councillor Talgetti, that's a red flag. What is do minimum? And it's not clear. So I think this does give us a little bit of breathing space to put us in a better position to have a greater conversation around this issue in the next long-term plan in a year's time. So,
Other speakers. Councillor Moore.
I was going to ask a question, but probably in the debate.
Take a question, certainly.
What happens to the building down here on the corner?
That would be part of that pause because it was identified as a preferred option of council. So in pausing that, literally there's a pause on that as well.
Borders is an older mate.
Councillor Duncan, Councillor Loudon, Councillor Duncan.
Obviously, I'm speaking for it, but the reason why I think this is a very good recommendation is because it still allows, opens up the gates to, in fact, still looking at preserving the heritage buildings if it becomes possible, given what Councillor Wilson said, because I note that there were a lot of people who submitted and said that they wanted nothing done, it was far too expensive, etc. But there were also a lot of people that said that the heritage was important to them. So leaving the gate open, as this does, is very good. Thank you.
Councillor Loudon.
I certainly agree with the pause process, and I'm a little bit concerned that it is tied to Three Waters understanding of the debt scenario. I think the council has broader issues around debt and also capital works, roading, all that sort of stuff, and I think that needs to be tied into it. I don't think you should actually tie it to Three Waters.
Yeah, I think Councillor Wilson will get it right, but I think he was using that as an example. Any speakers against this? Councillor Wilson.
Just in answer to the concerns from Councillor Loudon, if Three Waters was to be removed, it could be simply tied into councillor future debt scenarios as tabled and as in live documents. I think that is a reference point, and I think it would achieve exactly the same thing. So if Three Waters was to be removed and the words council debt future scenarios was to be replaced, then would that answer your question, Councillor? Would you be more comfortable? So that would be my right reply on that.
Now I must put it to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carry. Making substantial progress here. I have signalled the possibility of needing a budget to allow for some ongoing analysis or further work and necessary urgent maintenance on this building, for example. Does somebody have a motion or a view? And I'm probably looking to staff to think about this, but Councillor Kalka.
Just sort of a comment towards that. I feel like we kind of have that covered a little bit with the 19 million that's already been budgeted for in the long-term plan, and I would prefer to see some specifics around a couple of things, and one would be the suitability of this building for staff while we do nothing or pause, and the other one is there is a significant amount of maintenance required down at that High Street site that I know that recently we were sort of told that the last proper inspection was 2019, and then it was quoted to us that the building has deteriorated further since then.
This is why I'm looking for staff comment here, because there are some OPEX, CAPEX considerations in this mix. Mr. Toombs, how much do we have in the annual plan budget in terms of this coming year for Martin Civic Bill?
So the capital budget.
Or either.
Okay, the capital budget for Martin, as per the LTP, was 5 million
For this current year,
for next,
23-24.
yeah, the next financial year. Yeah.
So I'm presuming that we wouldn't need 5 million if we're pausing, but what I'm looking for is some direction and advice from staff here. I'll go to Adina, and then I'll go to Councillor Moore and Councillor Loudon. Adina, do you wish to make any comment around this?
Yes, thank you. So the last inspection for those corner buildings on Broadway and High Street was actually in April or March. So we had a really thorough inspection with some of the structural engineers that actually did the original assessment as well. And they have pointed out a few areas, as you mentioned, that need to be addressed. So we would be keen to make sure that we're addressing things on this building that doesn't make it go any worse, which includes the canopies, propping those properly and addressing some of the water damage that has been going on. For the buildings that we currently are located at, we obviously have a bit of a time frame that I need to just check what time frame that is to be with the earthquake prone building standards. So that has to be addressed in a certain number of years. But there are some things we can do to probably address these minor issues in the buildings before doing anything significant, or at least we can investigate what is required and how it could improve the current facilities.
I would ask staff, given the intent of this, I believe there would be an opportunity for staff to come back to us with a refined adoption around that intent prior to adoption next month. So I do believe you would have scope, because if anything, it's going to lower the budget or shift it sideways in some shape or form. Councillor Morn.
Yeah, that was pretty much my comments. Is it's hard for us to sit around here and set a budget today for further investigation. Staff could come back to us with a sort of a scope of what they'd be looking at.
Councillor Loudon, you were next.
It was quite strongly evident that submitters wish to maintain the heritage aspects of the main street, and submission 116 by Heritage New Zealand suggested that they would certainly desire that that building is maintained. But they also said, on questioning, that there was no funding available for the council to do that. But if it was in private hands, they could help with funding for that building to remain. And my suggestion is that possibly council should have that on the table as well, that gets solved.
Councillors, when I think about this, I think that it's unfair to place this obligation completely on staff at this meeting. I would be happy if the intent of, first of all, recommendation 5 flowed through to an advice from staff around what is necessary in this space.
Thank you, Worship. I'd be happy to lead that with my staff. If I can just be clear that the 3 areas that I've noted in the conversation is to do some investigation of what this building shape or footprint would look like, to ensure the safety of the existing buildings on Broadway. So it's any urgent things that Adina has just said that was highlighted in the recent analysis, but also to extend any urgent matters for this current building, given we are now pushing it out a little bit further. Broadly in line?
Yeah. Bearing in mind that the Better Business case gave some shape or form around this function. But I think in that case, I'm quite happy if there isn't a recommendation in here at the moment. Councillor Wilson, do you have an opposing view?
No, I don't, but just hearing what the Chief Executive said, could I just request that of that as well, we understand what the NBS absolute minimums are and the timeframes, as Adina has indicated. We know that this building does have a stick on it that says you are now entering a potentially earthquake-prone building. When was that done? When is the timeframe to work within the national legislation? I'd like some clear understanding of what those dates and timeframes are.
Yeah, that's an operational requirement. Happy, next, Councillor Dalgety.
What I would like to more clearly understand is what our options are under the heritage protection. We've had a pretty full paper put in front of us, but that can, bringing that information up to date and making sure it is at today. Where does that protection? What does that protection mean or restrict? Okay.
Right. There's no recommendation on the table, so we move on. Now,
I've taken that as an action, Your Worship.
Now, in terms of, I'll take some advice from staff around this, but what I suspect is as we go through the rest of the order paper, there are a number of recommendations there. They are quite specific, but they're also as part of the groups of submissions, and they are grouped together. I wonder if we deal with the groupings and look for any recommendations that come out of those groupings. For instance, effectively, I believe that we've dealt with Taihape Town Hall, Civic Centre, etc. And I wonder if we then move through almost sequentially in pages. How is there a preference from councillors or staff and advice from staff around how we progress this with regard to page numbers, etc.?
Yes, I think you've largely dealt with everything up to page 74. So I would be suggesting key choice 3 that starts on page 75, and you'll find that the recommendations that are on the board are also on at the end of each section, so we can cover them that way. Page 75.
Oh.
Yeah.
However, just in dealing with that, in terms of to make this tidy later, if I take up to page 74, 75, are there any officer comments that you wish to change? No.
Well,
The page number, councillor?
yes, and actually I'm very remiss, Your Worship, because we've already passed the minutes, but there was something that stuck out to me and I've only just remembered it. Is it possible to go back? No. Thank you.
If there is a glaring omission and something of light of new information that can be revisited, can you share your concern?
Yes, my concern is on submission number 126, page 13 of the previous minutes, and around Ngāti Tamakōperi speaking to us in the verbal submissions. It says in there on page 13, it says mana whenua, and I believe that should be tangata whenua. I think that those are the words that she used. I don't want to nitpick, but it might be of note.
Does anybody have any difficulty with it being changed from mana whenua to tangata whenua? No, look, we'll just do that. Not a great change.
Thank you, sorry about that.
So again, are there any officers' comment leading through to page 75? So key choices 1 and 2 that you wish to alter. And I will leave it to staff. When we've done, for instance, the recommendations, including recommendation 5, there will need to be officer comment that goes out to a whole lot of submitters and are quoted as part of response. That's the way it works. Okay, but I haven't listed individual cases there, but there's like a myriad of ones to cover it. Right, moving to page 75, this is the key choice 3, Calico Line Pathway. And looking for comment around that, around officers' comment or highlighting submissions, etc. Somebody then, Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I was very interested with this because when it came to council, I felt that it was a no-brainer and a safety issue and that it should go ahead. But I was very surprised to see quite strong comment by, for instance, the Martin Community Committee, who were not in favour of this proposal.
What I would like to see, rather than discussion, is a motion on the floor. Are you wishing to move?
No, thank you.
Councillor Morne, are you wishing to move?
Yeah, I'll move that council does not approve the additional unbudgeted blah, blah, blah.
looking for, so you're moving that council does not approve the additional unbudgeted debt funded spend of up to 300,000 to construct the new footpath from Ngātawa School to Martin along Calico Line. That's your motion. Looking for a seconder to that.
Can I amend? Suggest an amendment? No.
No, until there's a seconder, there's no motion. Councillor Wilson, are you seconding?
Seconding for discussion.
So are you wishing to make an amendment
Yes.
to what?
I would like to take away along Calico Line because I believe that there have been submissions that have suggestions that the pathway could be could go to Martin, but not necessarily along Calico Line.
No, it won't allow the amendment. If it fails, then you'd have the opportunity to foreshadow an alternate process. But this is quite specific around the request, I believe.
Key choice.
It is a key choice that went out in the document and it needs to live or die on that basis.
Thank you.
So not accepting the amendment on that basis. Sorry, who was the mover? Councillor Morn,
Okay.
do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I do. The reason for not approving it is I think we've got plenty of submissions to say let's look at the other option of waiting to get Wakatahi funding, things like that. I don't believe that we've scoped it out enough. I don't know, you know. I just don't think it's in this austerity, as an austerity measure, that it's the right time to do this. I want to see it linked with the Ngātawa Road one. I think there's a full plan for that. So at this stage, that's why I'm speaking for this motion, that we don't fund it at this stage.
Looking for other speakers? Yes.
Speaking to and as seconder for primarily exactly the same reasons as Councillor Moore. I don't think the project has been scoped in enough detail, and I do think he's hit the nail on the head. We already have a decision around Ngātawa Road, and it would seem to me that these two projects could be linked together as one, which would give us greater scope and perhaps greater cost benefit at some stage in the future. And that's why I'm hesitant to see this one go ahead. So I'll be speaking for the motion that we do not.
Councillor Dalgety?
I'll be speaking for the motion. When we were discussing this earlier, I was under the impression that the Ngātawa Road piece had in fact been approved, but it's since come to light only the design of that footpath. So currently we would not be able to connect with the Ngātawa Road. So yes, I would like this to go back to Wakatahi for consideration. With us reinforcing to Wakatahi that Ngātawa Road is the alternative to State Highway 1 when there is road closures, which seems to happen reasonably frequently. So I'm for the intent, but not at this time, and we have a long-term plan in a year's time.
I'll speak against the motion, and speaking against the motion allows the view of the alternate view here. They are a very significant business within our district. There is precedent in terms of Huntley School, but I believe there is considerable risk to those children that use in very large numbers this walkway. I think it genuinely puts them at risk. Whether or not there are other options or not has never been explored from the school. This is a request that has come from the school for this function, and they've sought public forum to outline that risk. So I've spoken against. Any other speakers against?
I have a question.
Question.
How was the Huntley pathway?
The Huntley pathway was probably not a fantastic process in terms of the governors, because the chief executive of the day just instructed staff to do it and literally use the footpath budget. And I can't be more direct than that, because that's the answer to your question. It did not come to the governors for consideration, it just happened. And it did happen within my time frame, so I'm probably the only one that can answer your question in terms of process. Councillor Wong.
I'm speaking against the motion. In consideration, the public feeling was that this project should have gone ahead because of the budgetary considerations of the council, and in light especially of our decision to pause the Martin Civic Centre, I feel we have perhaps satisfied some of their concern to a large extent, and the building of this pathway is relatively small capital layout, and considering the number of trucks that pass that, it's quite, I feel in safety considerations it is a relatively small gesture, but I think it's probably more important to a small number of people than we realise. So I don't support the motion as it stands.
Is this a question? Were you speaking? Speaking against?
I'm speaking against the motion. This is a difficult decision because the ministers have raised many issues around other footpaths around Martin. However, I feel as though this particular pathway is a safety issue, and I feel as though we do not wish to have any incident along Calico Line. It's certainly a road that goes very fast. I did raise at the time with the speedway along the speedway, yes, along Calico Line could be reduced to help mitigate that safety issue. But in weighing up all the options, I do feel as though the safety is the paramount concern.
Now have 3 speakers for, 3 speakers against. Right, a reply.
I'm not actually against the intent of the footpath and the reasons for it. I think it would be a good benefit, but I still stand by that this is an unbudgeted item, can come up in a long-term plan later on, and we have a responsibility to look at where we can save costs, and this is one of them at this stage.
That your right, a reply?
Yeah.
Just a point of view of clarification. When you say this is an unbudgeted item, it is a budgeted item. It is sitting with the annual plan budget.
It says up there, does not approve additional unbudgeted. So it says unbudgeted up there on the recommendation, so.
I just want to clarify where it sits in terms of that.
Yeah. Would you want me to respond to the question, Richard?
So it is unbudgeted with regards to the long-term plan. It is included within the rates position. That makes sense as a key choice.
Okay, so just supplementary to that then, if we don't do this, then we can knock some off our rates rise.
It's debt funded, so it would be very, very minor.
Yeah.
It's not needed to, I shouldn't have raised it, but. Right, now I must put it to the vote. Those in favour that we do not approve, raise your hands, please. Those against? Carried. So that motion fails. So it would be up to somebody to put the alternate view if they believe it should be funded. Are you wishing to move the alternate?
I move the alternate, yes.
That we do fund?
Refund.
Looking for a seconder to that, Councillor Cow, can you seconding? I know this sounds pedantic, failing one and doing the other, it just ties it up neatly. Councillor Wong, do you wish to speak to that?
No, not the same.
Any speakers too? With your permission, councillors?
Sorry, the seconder?
We had councillor Kalkano, as I said. Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. That takes us through to the next block, starting page
83.
83.
So this is really all other comments on other topics.
So in terms of pages 75 through to 83, is there anybody that is disagreeing who wants to alter, has a problem with councillor's report, sorry, staff report comment? Because this becomes councillor Wong.
This isn't part of the recommendations, but a lot of comment has been made about the Aotearoa Road Bridge. And though it's not included in the annual plan, it's a very significant and I would like to see somehow a comment made that council's doing everything it can, and it's the annual plan decisions won't affect the emphasis that we put on it. Do you have some? I think we've.
So if I refer to page 82, the officer comment there is the repair work on Aotearoa Bridge will go ahead regardless of the decision made regarding the Ngātawa School footpath at Calico Line. Do you wish to see that expanded?
I do, and yes, please.
And how would you like to see that changed? And in response to which submissions? Is the interesting thing.
Can I just make a point that there's further detail on page 101. There's actually a topic that talks about Aotearoa Bridge there. Topic 1 on page 1 starts on page 99, and the officer comment on page 101 outlines what council is doing, and it is a high priority, and what council's program is around that bridge. Yeah.
Are you happy with that?
Probably have read it.
It's hard to remember everything.
It's hard because because I've read it all, you know, and you tend to do all the things in isolation. So you're right to raise it.
Thank you.
So we are happy with the officer's comment and back to submitters through to page 83. Right, we take the next bracket. I look at recommendation 7. This is introduction of the forestry rating differential, which is page 85, is included in that grouping. But anything, or do we wish to go straight to recommendation of recommendation 7? You're wishing to move?
Happy to move recommendation, you wish, 7.
In its present form, that it continues?
In its present form.
You looking to second that? Do you wish to speak to that?
Yes, we should only say that it's been widely circulated for discussion with the industry groups involved, and I don't think there needs to be anything more referred to than that.
Any other, we've got a mover, and do we have a seconder? Councillor Wong, yes we did. Any speakers to this? Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I'll speak for it because it has been indicated for quite a while that may apply. But just recording the feelings that some submitters wanted that to be miles higher than that. And it's something we can look at the next long-term plan, I gather.
Can you refer me to a submitter that said that they wanted it higher?
106.
106?
What, sorry, 108.
108, I'm taking it from my secretary.
Any day.
Thank you.
Good work, councillor.
Teamwork.
So you've spoken to it,
So I have, thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
I'll speak in favour of it, echoing the fact that Federated Farmers particularly, but also other submitters have said that it should be a 4 times rate, which I hope to discuss further down the track. Also saying that there is a page 85, there is a typo, which for meaning should be changed. It is in the middle of the page, submitter 227, etc. It is unfair to be charged for damage not caused by others and not by them. That first damage that not should be taken out.
Page 85 where?
Right, it's right in the middle.
Okay.
It starts submitter 227.
Yeah, I see that.
Thank you.
No objection to that change. Councillor Loudon, Councillor Calkin, Councillor Loudon.
I'd like to speak against this, the recommendation as it stands. I do feel as though Federated Farmers made a strong case for differential being 4 and not 1.5. And they mentioned in their submission that that's actually been tested in the courts. I feel as though council should make a strong stand.
Spoken against, Councillor Calkin.
Also speaking against, and my reason for speaking against is I feel that it creates a precedent where applying a differential for road damage for forestry then opens up a conversation about road damage for other industry as well. And given how intense that use is for forestry in a short period of time versus long-term use of roads by heavy vehicles creates another conversation, so I'm against.
So we've had how many speakers against? 1, 2, and a couple of speakers for. There's still scope here, councillors. I'll speak in favour of this. There's been a huge amount of consultation, and even the forestry sector agrees that there should be a charge. So that's sort of speaking against your position, and they proposed a possible alternate mechanism, and in agreeing with that this should be an issue that is looked at. So I'm comfortable that there is a desire to work with us in this. In terms of saying it's not great enough in terms of cost, that would need to be something that could be dealt with in this meeting. But in fairness to the sector, we have consulted heavily with regard to one layer. Whether that is reviewed in the future is quite a consideration in my mind, but I think we have to be honest with what we as a council went out for. Any other speakers? Councillor Wilson, go back to right of reply.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just to state what may or may not be obvious, but differentials and targeted rates are not uncommon throughout local government. In the rating sector, it's a very, very common practice. Whilst we don't engage in it a great deal here in the Rangitiki district, it is very, very common, and many of our close neighbours have that. With regards to increasing the factor that we've applied to there, and I stand to be corrected here, but to get to a number anywhere near 4 would be a significant re-engagement and would trigger our significance engagement policy, I would suspect, as it is a rating matter. So I would not see that we have any ability to change that number at today's meeting. So I'm happy with the recommendation as worded and as I have moved. I stand to be corrected on those comments, so Your Worship.
To right of reply. I now must put the vote. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you. That moves us through. Bear in mind that recommendation falls within this block, recommendation 8, that council does not or delete, do not, request staff to liaise with Waka Kotahi and Kiwi Rail to assess the options for the shared pathway from Dixon Way into Taihape. Councillors, do you have a view here?
I'd like to move, do request staff to liaise with Waka Kotahi.
Councillor Duncan, you second it. Do you wish to speak to this?
Oh, just to say that it's a request that we can have a look at the options for Dixon Way and Taihape. Something, I won't go retrospectively, but yeah, that's all really. It's an investigation in essence.
Other speakers, Councillor Wilson.
Speaking in favour, but also noting that this conversation with Waka Kotahi has been had in the past for exactly this stretch of road. It has been difficult to progress it further, but I'm just noting that the conversation has been had in the past, and I believe on more than one occasion.
Any other speakers? Right of reply?
No.
No, put to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. My understanding of this is it doesn't involve a budget as such at the moment, that it involves a liaison and discussion. Good luck with that. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, before we go further, I just note with the officer's comments on page 87 particularly, there seems to be a change in rhetoric that I have not come up against before.
Sorry, what page, Councillor?
87
Yep.
and 89. There are comments, sorry, I've just lost it. 89.
87.
87 and 89, sorry. 8. That, beg your pardon, I'm just having trouble with technology here. Twice on page 87, there is a reference to rates are a tax and not a fee for service. And it goes down further into that document. And I just wonder if our ratepayers are aware of this change of description. I don't believe it would be popular and needs to be explained because it's, in a way, I do believe that ratepayers see that what they pay is for services from the council, and therefore, if we are going to use this sort of these words, or this phrase particularly, it needs to be socialised quite extensively.
I tend to agree with you. I would actually delete that whole sentence, that second sentence. I don't see the necessity for it. To say that officers do not recommend introducing differential for roading rate based on rural, non-rural split, I would leave it there as an answer. I think otherwise you're entering into all sorts of other discussions that are not necessary.
Maybe take that as an action, Your Worship.
Further to that, may I? At the bottom of the page, it says it again. At the top of page 88 and at the bottom of page 88, those sentences.
Yeah, I understand what the staff are getting at here, but I think it adds a complexity that's not needed in this case.
Thank you.
So can we note that as an amendment when we come back to the recommendation for receiving officer comment? Is there anybody that is against that change? No, by the way, we'll stop in 15 minutes time for a break. Councillor.
I can understand that the reason that this was written is because a lot of the people who are not using the services are saying we need our rates reduced, and it does explain why it's not a user pay system totally, but so I can understand why it was included in there, but that is, another way of explaining it would be, and it probably needs to be addressed because it's popped up a number of times where they say we're not using the service because we live out in the Wops. So I feel to totally exclude it is also not answering their question. It's sort of unfortunately being part of a community, a society, you have to pay towards the cost that you don't use, etc., etc.
Are you, with that conversation, are you wishing for a change?
Well, listen, you would fill my gaps in here because you're eloquent than I am.
I run into all sorts of accusations there.
That's the legal stuff too.
Leave that. Look, just pointed out to me that we have lunch coming at 12. We do need to stop as part of council protocol within the 2 hours. What I'd suggest is we do stop for 10 minutes now and resume at between 10 past and quarter past, and we go for another 3/4 an hour. I think you're making significant progress, councillor.
25 past.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So we'll take a break for 10 minutes now. Those.
Yeah, no.
Thank you. Thank you back, and thank you to everybody back online. So we now start again with which page?
So we're on page 89.
Thank you. So look, I'm presuming that there is no further officer comment that you want changed pages through to page 89? No? Cool. In terms of capital projects, page 89. Questions? No? The next recommendation in terms of recommendation 9, that council doesn't or does not approve funding for youth line, does that come within that block? Not sure that it does. I think it comes in the next block, doesn't it? Which starts at page what? 117. 117 is correct. Thank you. Does
So whether you want to go through each section if there's clarification or anything needed.
I would like to go back to submission topic, page 89, the submission from Rosie Gilbert. And it talks about amenities, recreational facilities upgrades, and makes the comment that council has committed 50,000 towards a new playground at Memorial Park. And I note further in the reports that there is a submission from Charity Davis around exactly the same things, but being specific to the Taipi playground. The answers to those are that we're waiting on the recreational parks upgrade plans. This is where I have a problem. We have been involved in waiting and holding this program up for the best part of a couple of years. And I don't think that's a fair position. So what I'd like to see is that progressed, and whether it is a subset of that recreational program or not, that we actually need to be able to give them an answer. They potentially are losing money because they can't act and they're getting frustrated. I know this is in your category. You know, do we have a time frame around this that is an absolute time frame that they would get an answer as part of this?
Yeah, just quickly on there's two things going on. The one is the parks strategy that's just about finalised, and that has no option. It has no problem with the new play park. It's the urban design of the memorial park. So in other words, the question of where should it go is the one that we are working on. So that's progressing really well and should be completed probably in the next 2 or 3 months. We are communicating with this group to tell them where we are with all of that. And obviously the delay is with me being away for a long time. So it's just, we don't want them to start building and it ends up in the wrong place.
Well, would you consider that council staff, as part of their response, could give a time frame for a decision?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. What would be a fair time frame?
I'd have to speak to the consultants, just ask them. They've done quite a bit of work up in Taipei over the last 2 months with a lot of consultation with the community. They had a weekend workshop there a little while ago, so I can confirm that, Your Worship, if that will help.
Yeah, I just want to see some resolution. Councillor Duncan, you've got it.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, for bringing up this submission from Rosie. That's 022 if anyone wants to look at it. But in there, she actually is asking for that $50,000 to be granted to the group to start their design process. Now, I know that my understanding of the $50,000 is that it's a final funding position. and not a seed funding. So it was suggest that this is seed funding that they're after to get the design process going, which is not building, and could easily then work into the urban design, should it be 2 to 3 months or whatever. I'm just wondering if there is something that we could also suggest for this group to help them progress their design stage.
They haven't, you've got to be careful here as to what scope you have within the submission you've been given. Councillor Delgado, I need to.
I also feel this group are rightfully getting impatient. The issue is they can't apply for outside funding because none of that background of exactly what they're doing is formed, and so they're sitting there in not able to move a lot.
Thank you. Dina, I see you've got your hand up. Nice hand, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Maybe just a couple of things to note. So the company Becker that is doing this assessment, they are just in the finalization of their sort of report and summary to us. So we can expect that in the next month or two. What I think also will be quite helpful for this group is that having this report done will actually support their funding applications quite nicely, because it will outline how this fits into a big picture and how the whole park is going to be a multi-purpose facility, which is what a lot of funders are looking for. So just a couple of updates here.
Yeah, I'm just aware, the reason I raise this, I'm aware of the frustration, and I think it is justified. I'm also aware of funding organisations, for instance, like the Dudding Trust, etc., that is open now, that they would be probably, it's not our funding, so I can't prejudge here, but there are a number of opportunities that these groups may not have if we don't actually move on this. So what I'd be looking for is, at the very least, an officer comment that says, hey, you'll be in the position to make a decision, or we will have the information provided for you within a reasonable space of time, and declare what that time is. Councillor Moore.
Just a question for clarification, the 50,000 is already
Correct.
budgeted and...
Yeah, it's locked and loaded. Can staff have a think about that, please, in terms of, and so that we can, as amended, and we're presuming that'll be amended on that basis.
Yeah.
So, Peter, did you have something you wanted to say? You're just directing me to warn me that Adina was on the letter. Thank you. That will deal with the later submission with regard to Charity Davis. Just a question, a local knowledge thing here, Councillor Duncan. Is Rosie working closely with Charity?
Yes.
I thought she was part of that team, but I wasn't 100% sure. Thank you. If we go to page 117, and I'm presuming there's no other officer comment that you want preceding that changed? No? Great. The recommendations that council does or does not provide funding for Youth Line in the financial year. Councillor Kalkin, you wishing to move?
Yes, the council does not provide funding.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Wilson seconding. Questions of councillors? Let you speak to you.
Thank you, Richard. I think this one, for me, the reason for not wanting to provide funding, while I appreciate the work that they do, is extremely valuable, I don't see the funding request sitting in our world. What he's asking for in his submission is to go into schools for an additional day. And for me, I feel like the funding opportunities for that should sit outside of ratepayer funds.
Any other speakers? Councillor Louder.
Speaking against the motion, this is a community wellbeing thing, and the fact that they actually go to Taiapi, which is a long way away from their base, I think is important. I do wonder whether they are coordinating with Makai Pātia services and whether that could be encouraged. It's not stated here. Yeah, I wish to speak against the motion.
Right, a reply? Put it to the vote. Those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4. Can I just do this because it's getting close? I'll go back. Those in favour of the motion, which is not to fund, please raise your hands. Peter, can you do a count?
Yeah, I can see 5, Your Worship. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you.
Those against the motion?
3, 4.
Motion
There
carried.
are 9, so yeah.
Thank you. The next one we have in that bracket is 119, so I'm presuming there's no officer comment needs to change between 117 and, 120. Councillor Duncan.
Sorry, I'm just going back to 116. I didn't get there before you carried on. It should have toilet on the end of that sentence at the end because it says summary of submissions at the bottom of 116 again. In the annual plan stating the Springvale Bridge has been installed. So it should be Springvale Bridge toilet.
Yeah, there was a comment there around the timing, wasn't there, from staff?
Yes, but the actual word toilet's not there. It's talking about stating that it's talking about the Springvale Bridge being installed at this point. It's just a typo. I mean, it's a lack of word.
Okay. Yeah.
The bridge is already there. Yes, it's true. But it's regarding.
Well, they've done well to install the bridge.
Thank you, yes. Excellent work.
Can you just have that corrected, Councillor Wilson?
Recommendation 10, Your Worship.
Recommendation 10. And
Considers.
with what words?
Consider.
So you're saying that the recommendation 10, that council considers dry bulk toilets at all the cemeteries, etc. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Duncan, you're seconding that. You wish to speak to it?
Yes, I think it's the key word is consider, because I think if we consider it, then we're actually going to understand a little bit better what the costs are and what the needs might be. I don't necessarily believe that the outcome of that, without predetermining, will be a dry bulk toilet in every cemetery in the district, but there may be some significant needs for one or two, and I'd happy to see some consideration be given to that in the long-term plan.
Other speakers to it? More questions? Councillor Dalgety.
Speak in favour of the motion.
Councillor Duncan.
Just like to speak in favour also that specifically the Taihape provider for the cemetery services has asked on several occasions he can have up to 400 people at the cemetery and no toilet facilities.
The key word here is consider, isn't it? Any speakers against? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Excuse me, those against? Carried, thank you. Recommendation 11, that council does or does not support funding of lighting at the Taiapi courts to the value of $48,393.80. They're quite specific around that. Is associated with the quote from Alf Downs. Any speakers? Any questions I can take?
Just to remind me, sorry, because I did read this paper, but can you remind me that is this 48,000, is that considered part of the money that's already been committed to this group, or is this as well as?
Okay, so Taihape Tennis applied for and got $50,000. Sorry?
100,000.
100,000, but of which some of it was for nets and surface, etc., which left them with possibly $50,000 towards lighting. And then you had Taihape, maybe I'll leave you to.
So the original application came through the last long-term plan, and that was solely from Taihape Tennis. They applied for 100,000, and as His Worship has said, 50,000 is towards resurfacing the courts, and the other 50,000 is towards this lighting project. And so Taihape Netball hasn't applied previously.
To answer the councillor's question, this is in addition to that 50,000 that tennis is putting into that.
Yes.
The sum total is 90-something thousand.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Duncan.
I'd like to move that council does support the funding of lighting at the Taihape courts.
I'm just not clear now. So
We're looking for. So Councillor Duncan's moving that council does support funding of light at the Taihape courts to the value of $48,393.80. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Loudon, you seconding that. A question?
yeah, sorry. So they were given 100,000 and now asking for another 48. Or this is part of that 100. The balance of the 100.
Part of the 100. So part
Right.
of the
Thank
100.
you. I'm right now.
Part of the 100 was used for nets, etc.
I'm sorry, Worship, I may have a different view, if I may.
Yeah.
So the 100,000, Taihape Tennis applied for that, and they have contributed 50,000 towards this lighting project. And now Taihape Netball is applying for approximately 50,000 with the support of Taihape Tennis. Yeah.
So that would mean Taihape Tennis would therefore, if you granted this, would contribute 48,000 towards the lighting, and Taihape Netball would, so this is unique to Taihape Netball, would contribute 48, and Taihape Tennis would contribute 50 that they've already been given as part of the LTP, sum total 98.
Thank you very much.
Could I move an amendment to this? And the amendment would read, the full motion would read, council does support the funding of lighting at the Taihape courts to the value of $48,393.80. If other funding cannot be found within the next 3 months.
Is it a shadow motion or an amendment?
It would be amendment to it. That's still saying it would go ahead, so it hasn't substantially changed the motion. If other funding cannot be found within a reasonable space of time.
6 months.
6 months?
Question?
So
Your signs.
you're happy to second that as amendment? Question about the amendment?
Is this an extra $50,000 over and above what's been budgeted for?
Yes, correct.
Yes. So it's in effect, at 100,000, you're going to get 150,000.
The 100,000 has already been budgeted as part of the long-term plan, the current long-term plan, and this is additional.
Extra 50,000.
So we're funding 98.
Councillor Kalkin, are you questioning something about the amendment?
It's a comment just for councillors' benefit to potentially go and have a look at page 22 of the submission that was made by Tennis and Netball, because they have been very transparent on this and how the funding for the total lighting package was going to be completed. And it may be of value to potentially see that, to then provide that clarity.
Which page
of where it's
number?
coming from. So it's on submission between 190 and 253, and it's page 22.
Oh, you're going back to these documents.
It's not on my 22.
Submission 190 to 253.
Oh, different.
190 to 253. And that's submission number 190.
Can I just deal with the amendment first? Councillor
I
Duncan.
have a question of the amendment, only in that I would like to make sure that that doesn't encroach on any scheduling of actual putting the lighting in that they've already gone ahead with. If they have already gone ahead with it, that's my questioning. Is 6 months, 3 months, whatever, is that going to encroach on when they want to install that lighting for the summer season? That's my question.
I'm not sure I can give you a specific answer to that.
I can't answer that specifically, but the court resurfacing is scheduled for December. So ideally, any lighting work, hopefully, will be programmed before
So
that.
6 months would allow for that.
Yes.
So I'll speak to the amendment. I am aware, and I can't disclose, around some possible alternate funding. And so I would prefer that if council staff can work with both netball and tennis around being able to secure possible alternate funding, my preference is that council doesn't fund it, somebody else does. But the amendment is there to say that if that can't happen, then there's still council money available. And whether you live with that or not, council allowed it.
Can I ask, is this a council facility?
Yes, yes.
May preclude some funders.
Sorry?
That may preclude a funder.
It would the extra funding I'm thinking of as a possibility would not be a council funder in any shape. Be an alternate funder. Councillor Wilson, Councillor, question.
Speaking to the amendment, but speaking against and understanding your premise of your words around it and what you've just said. However, as the amendment reads, I'd be quite happy to sit for 6 months and do nothing and get $48,900 or $393.80 guaranteed from council. So I don't think we can put that position in there because it's a fairly ambiguous amendment at best. I appreciate your sentiments behind it, but and also the comment from Councillor Cowkin, just having a look, I'm not sure that external funding has truly been tested by this organisation that I can see in their submission. So I wouldn't want to see this amendment passed in that wording.
Yeah, the amendment effectively opens the door for somebody else to fund it. And there would be a genuine attempt with council staff to facilitate that. Unfortunately, I'm not in the position, there is a possible funder. I'm not in the position in terms of confidentiality to be able to say who that funder is, but there is a reasonable chance, in my view, that this funding would be picked up by someone else. Questions? Are you wishing to speak to the amendment? Yes, go ahead.
I'll speak in favour of the amendment based on what you've said, but also in agreement with Councillor Wilson. I was very concerned that they haven't applied elsewhere for funding, as many of these types of groups throughout the district are, and then coming to the council as last funder. and that's the way I prefer these groups to operate.
I think that would be conveyed back to them as well. But,
I want to
Councillor
speak
Moore,
against the motion, because when we
that's
went
the
through
motion or the amendment?
the amendment, and if that's lost, I'll speak against the other one, but, the fact is that we went through our spreadsheet and we cut off some of our community funding, to save ratepayer money. And then, through the submission process, we are giving out quite a bit of money through another avenue. And that will negate some of the savings we tried to make in our ratepayer spreadsheet to keep our rates down to around the 9% mark. So, and that's why I'm speaking against it. We've done one thing, now we're handing it out the other side.
Councillor Doak, speaking only to the amendment.
I'm speaking in favour of the amendment. And just as a bit of background, I believe that the $100,000 that went to tennis in part was committed during consultation on the fact that they were going to lose a court to the amenities build. Likewise, netball were encroached upon, and it was a very good agreement as far as I could see at the time, but that might give some background as to where that other money came from.
Councillor,
I'd like to speak for the motion or amendment, but before I do, I'd like to clarify, maybe it should read, council does support funding of the lighting of the Taipi courts up to a value of $48,000. They may get funding in part from other sources, but not the whole amount.
yeah, we can only deal with the amendment at the moment.
I was impressed with the submissions from Taipi Netball and tennis. They have grown the club and significantly over the last few years, and
We'll speak to the amendment only at this stage.
in favour.
Any other speakers, just the amendment? I'm losing track of the numbers for and against here, by the way.
Just asking, am I able to speak in favour of the numbers?
Look, I think we've had 3 speakers for, and I need to stick with that, especially as I've just wanted to move as the amendment. As just to tie this up with the right of reply, Councillor Morn, what I'm trying to do here is potentially save council money here if the motion was to succeed. If the, in its present shape or form, if the motion succeeds, then the money is just available. What I'll put as a caveat around there may be an alternate process. Look, I'll put the amendment to the vote. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Now, a substantial motion, Your Worship, was
Correct.
that correct?
Could I foreshadow?
You can foreshadow.
I'd like to foreshadow a motion that says that council does not support the funding lighting to Taipi for their vow, and council directs staff to work directly with the clubs to seek alternative funding.
Accept that as a foreshadowed motion. I go back to the substantive motion. So the mover is of the substantive motion, not the amendment, is that council does support funding of the lighting of the Taipi courts to the value of 48,000, including the amendment. The mover of that is Councillor Duncan, seconded by Councillor Loudon. Let's retreat a little bit. You wish to speak to it as the substantive motion? What do you?
Yes. Just to say that I believe this club has worked really hard. Taipi Netball was actually quite sad a couple of years ago. The facilities have not been good. they called it the cheese grater, the surface, and they lost a lot of players and were not able to bring competition into Taihape. So this is really encouraging to see that they've worked hard to grow the club, as I said, and I think this is actually funding for success. The Taihape tennis has already got that amount of money. They can't do it on their own, and by council supporting this, we are funding them, both the clubs, for success.
Thank you. Other speakers to it?
Speaking against?
Speaking against?
I will speak against the motion again. It commits council to that sum of money. It absolutely commits us to 48,000. And again, I understand His Worship's intent, but this is a commitment. And the words absolutely commit us to that, taking that responsibility on, whether or not any external funding is sought. I mean, if that's what the council seeks, then why are we even mucking around? Why don't we just say yes now? Because effectively that's what you're doing. And that's a concern that I have. And that's not the intent of what I believe the amendment was posed to us as a council to say, but that's what the outcome of this amendment will be. So I'm speaking quite strongly against it.
Councillor Moore?
Yeah, I'll speak against it too. Again, reiterating, we reduced our grants funding to reduce rates, and now we're going about it another way, giving money out. So.
Councillor Kalkin?
I want to speak in favour of the motion. I was really impressed with at the hearings, the presentation from both netball and tennis in Taihape. Really impressed with the way that they have gone about doing all the background work to get this ready. They are going to be improving one of council assets in the district up there by adding the lighting. They're going to be solving a need for both clubs. They're both contributing their own funds into this project as well. And I think it's a good use of council funds to put towards ring fencing, is the term I'll use, the 48,000 plus change on the provision that there is a chance for another funder to support.
And 2 speakers for, 2 speakers against. Any other speakers? Go back to right or reply.
No, thank you.
Put it to vote. Those in favour, please raise your hands. That's carried. So that rules out the foreshadowed motion. And it is now midday and lunch is there. Councillors will stop for lunch. Would it be reasonable to expect half an hour? Thank you very much. Adjourn and we'll resume in half an hour.